Welcome back to the Art and Skill of Coaching, where I teach you how to coach. So you can tell how effective a coach is by how they structure and actually run their sessions. Most coaches will end up starting their calls off with something like, "How are you doing today?" or "What's been going on this week?" And although that sounds supportive, it's actually more so in alignment with empty rapport and immediately takes you out of leadership. And it's one of the biggest reasons sessions end up lacking direction and impact over time. And the reason for that is because when a session doesn't have any structure, when there's no focus, there's no accountability, there's no clear path towards the client's goals, the session might feel good, but it doesn't create growth. I'm going to say that again because your job as a coach is to facilitate results, not just fluffy feelings. The value of a session is not to make a client just feel good, it's to actually help them experience growth. And before we dive into today's topic, I do want to talk about the other extreme. And this is the coach that plans every single minute of the session. They come in with this rigid playbook and they leave no space for intuition, emotion, or what's actually present for the client. And both approaches miss the mark massively. And so the goal of a really great coaching session is what I like to call the flow within the structure. And basically what that is, and I'm going to break down how to create that today, is that you have enough framework to have boundaries for the session, to create direction and focus with enough flexibility to stay responsive to the client and the contacts. And this is actually the model I teach inside of the Art and Skill of Coaching, my advanced coach training program. And we teach a session structure that is actually evidence-based, meaning it's backed by science, and it is based in therapy principles. But the way that I've adopted it, it is super applicable to coaching, and it's built around helping clients change the thought and behavioral patterns that are keeping them stuck. And today I'm going to walk you through these exact steps and how to use it. It is a 5-step structure that I'm going to be breaking down for you today to help you consistently create progress and transformation for your coaching clients. So let's go ahead and dive in. So step 1 is that you want to make sure you lead the call in leadership, meaning you should be kicking off the call. You should be the first one speaking. You should be the one opening up the space. And how you start is going to determine how the rest of the call unfolds. This is true in most conversations, including coaching ones. So again, start in leadership. And how this might sound is it's really simple. Maybe you say something like, "Hey, Tasha, I'm looking forward to working on X, Y, and Z today." Or, "Hey, Tasha, this is session 10 out of 13, and we're moving into the last month of our coaching container. What are you most excited about working on today?" Or, "Hey, Tasha, I got your session prep form. I was able to review it, and I'm excited to dive into the agenda items today." It can sound anything like that, but this simple structure and this kickoff of the call really creates clarity and puts you in a position of kindness and authority. The client knows that you are ready, you are professional, and it immediately sets the tone for the call to have direction. It helps the client also orient in time and space and be intentional around the fact that this is a coaching session, not just a casual conversation. And I know what some of you might be thinking, so let me say this really quickly before we move into step 2. If you're thinking this feels a little too authoritative or impersonal, at this point, you don't need a really long warm-up. Wasting the client's time and therefore their money to build more rapport is a misuse of that time. Rapport is meant for early on in the relationship. It should have been done throughout the consultation, the onboarding process in the first few sessions. Once that foundation is set, it is your job to protect the time and move towards the work quickly for your clients. So, step 1, start with leadership. Step 2 is move into celebrations. So you can achieve this really simply by just asking, "Tell me what's going well before we kick off today's call," or "What do you want to acknowledge or celebrate today?" And this isn't just about achievements, by the way. So keep that in mind as the coach and make sure that you communicate that to your clients. This is about progress. This is about insight. This is about capacity. You want to start to help train your clients' attention to look for what's working. Where are they winning? How are they getting better? What are their strengths, their resources, the awareness that's being gained as a result of the coaching? But here's a little caveat to step 2 of celebrations. Do not get stuck here, okay? I recently did a podcast episode a few weeks ago on the top 3 mistakes I see coaches make because I was doing audits inside of my certification program, the Art and Skill of Coaching. And this is something that came up on a few of the coaches' audits, that they were following the structure, but they got stuck in step 2, celebrations. And what ends up happening is that the coaching session felt more like a cheerleading session than a coaching session. So you want to keep this portion brief. I would say 5 minutes or less, so that the session doesn't unintentionally drift into that cheerleading feel, that supportive coaching, that friend casual conversation. Once you accomplish that, you want to move into step 3, which is bridging the sessions. I do not see this happening often in a lot of coaching sessions, and even though it's a small step, it is extremely helpful because this is where you as the coach connect the dots. You have the responsibility of bridging those sessions together and making sure that the client is able to see their own growth and their patterns. And so what this sounds like, if you've never heard of bridging the sessions together, is it might sound something like, last week we worked on differentiating between considering other people's feelings and taking responsibility for them. And I saw in your prep form that you practiced that this week in a conversation that came up with your colleague. How did that go? Tell me about it. Or how did you apply the concept that we talked about last week? It's a subtle form of accountability to not only the homework, but doing the work and finding opportunities to integrate the awareness and skill being taught in the coaching and prevent you from getting stuck in crisis of the week. Now, one thing I want to say before we jump into step 4 is you might have heard me reference something called a session prep form a few times on this podcast episode. And these are really helpful, especially for clients who feel really scattered or flooded or are unsure what to work on week to week. So a simple prep form can really help them feel centered before a call and help them feel focused and accountable. And so what my session prep forms look like is it's just 3 questions, but you can design yours however best fits your clientele and your process. But for me, I like to check in with how are you feeling mentally, emotionally, and physically? What progress did you make towards your homework and or where did you get stuck? It's a really simple and easy form of accountability. And then the third question I always ask is what would make this session valuable or what do you need from me in the coaching session today? This question I think is the most important regardless of what you decide to assess for before your sessions. It really helps me start to identify session goals and prepare if I need to, but it also helps the client take responsibility for the work and really think about how to best utilize our time together. Not to mention it's something I can utilize and invite the client back to if they get off track in the session. Having clarity before your coaching calls is going to help keep both of you focused. And speaking of focus, that is what takes me to step number 4 in the session structure I teach inside of the Art and Skill of Coaching, and it's setting the agenda. This again is another short but crucial step, and it's one of the most important in the session structure. And it could be as simple as asking, what would be the most valuable for us to focus on today? Or what would you like some coaching on? Or how could I help? And this doesn't limit the conversation or make the conversation super rigid. It just creates direction. You can always adjust midsection as relevant or important things come up, but you and the client need to decide ahead of time, what is success going to look like for this call, and make sure that you keep them on track for that. Your agenda is also going to inform what interventions or approaches you'll use during the change work portion of the call. And I actually teach our coaches how to match appropriate interventions to the client's presenting problems or desired outcome, because that's what makes a session effective. And if this is an area of improvement for you, I would definitely encourage you to check out our fall class. There's a link in the show notes to learn more. But let's go ahead and dive into the final step. So step 5 is you want to wrap up with homework. In the final few minutes, you want to pause and start to consolidate the learning. Maybe you ask, what awareness stood out to you today? What's really resonating with you? What do you want to practice this week? How do you want to implement this awareness this week? Or you can kick it off by really just sharing your recollection of major breakthroughs or insights and help the client make those tangible for the week and encourage them to identify how and when they can integrate or practice that before the next session, because the reality is that an hour-long phone call a week is not going to change anyone's life. But taking whatever comes up in that call and finding opportunities to integrate it in real time throughout the week in between the sessions is where the real growth happens. Now, those are the 5 steps. We're going to review them in a second, but I want to give you a bonus tip really quickly that you might not utilize all the time, but when appropriate, it is really helpful. And this is asking for feedback. And that could be as simple as, what would you rate today's session? What was really helpful? Hey, we're 30 days in. Is there anything about my approach that you're appreciating or would like for me to change to be more effective for you? This invites the client into the work and really helps share that responsibility and provides natural check-ins to make sure that that client-coach relationship is exactly where it needs to be to make sure that progress can be achieved. So let me go ahead and tie this together and show you what these 5 steps could look like in, let's say, a 45-minute session, which is how long my one-on-one calls are. So I spend about 5 minutes kicking off the call in leadership, greeting the client, and eliciting celebrations. I spend about 5 minutes bridging the sessions, checking in with homework, creating accountability, and setting the agenda. And that gives me 30 minutes of deep coaching. So based on what they want to achieve in that call, I'm coming prepared with a couple interventions in my massive coach toolbox, and I'm really helping them either create insight and go deeper or make progress and break through any barriers mentally or behaviorally to get closer to achieving their goal. And then I have about 5 minutes left where I'm starting to move into reflection. I'm assigning homework and we're wrapping up. And again, the 5 simple steps to structuring your coaching calls are open in leadership, celebrate, bridge the sessions, set the agenda, and close with homework. When you follow this structure or somewhat of this structure, clients are going to come prepared, they're going to come focused, and they're going to be more in a coachable mindset because the sessions are going to feel consistent, they're going to feel intentional, and your role is going to become clear. You are not their friend, you are not a fixer, you are not the expert, you are a coach who is going to help them facilitate change. So I really encourage you to try this simple structure. It is simple, but it is based in science and it works. I've been using it for 15 years as a therapist and coach, and I've taught all of the ASC graduates how to use it, and it has up-leveled their coaching massively. So definitely try it out and see if you feel the difference. And if you want to develop this level of skill and structure in your own coaching, we go way deeper inside of the art and skill of coaching on not just how to structure an individual session, but how to structure an actual coaching experience to make sure that that client gets results. Enrollment for our next round opens soon, and you can join the waitlist now, though, to stay up to date with important details and dates. I'll throw the link in the show notes. You'll also find other links in the show notes, like to our weekly free coach question of the week, where we drop a deep and powerful coaching question right into your inbox that you can utilize in your own self-coaching or with your clients. So as always, I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, please share it, leave us a review, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another training to help you master the art and skill of coaching.